Hello and welcome to Module 2, all about a sustainable mindset to healthy eating. This is really critical because without the awareness of what is the right way, we can take the things that we've indirectly learned, that we've absorbed, and we think are the right ways to do things. That there's good and bad foods, that there's a right and a wrong way, that there's black and white thinking essentially. And often that's not the healthy, sustainable way to look. That's often not the healthy and sustainable way to go about things. So let's have a look at what we're going to be going through today. How to adapt effectively to this style of eating, to prioritize the right things, to have systems thinking, to have right thinking, and to understand your body. So let's dive into it. Okay, so when it comes to adapting effectively, I've created this little chart here that I think helps a lot. So let's say what you've been doing for the longest time. Now let's just take an example of someone that's been eating junk food, fast food every night of the week. So that's their comfort zone here. Or let's just say every meal is ordered out takeaway. Them going from that baseline, that comfort zone, to then trying to cook every meal themselves is going to be impractical, unrealistic, unsustainable. So, not to mention, it's not just their ability to actually cook it, but even their gut microbiome may not be able to absorb it, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But basically, what you want to think about is where are you at? Where's your comfort zone? Are you eating a home cooked meal each night and you're eating kind of packaged food for breakfast and lunch? If that's the case, it may be practical to start swapping out one meal, breakfast, and focus on that because ultimately we only have so much capacity to change. And the problem that often comes with trying to eat a particular way is we go, oh, well, I've been eating bad food and this is what I need to be eating. I'm going to try and overhaul everything and commit to this. And you don't enjoy the food. It's an absolute effort to try and cook. And it's just beyond your ability to adapt to it. And then you get X amount of time in, your willpower's gone, and you go, you know what? This healthy eating thing, like, fuck it, I'm done. I'd rather just do what I can do sustainably. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. And that's where the wheels fall off for a lot of people. Now, obviously, the less resistance you create for yourself, so you know what you're doing, the more it tastes better, the more you feel better, the more your body responds well to it, and the less willpower it requires, the more sustainable it's going to be. So I really want you to think about where do you sit in terms of this? What is it that you're trying to achieve here? If you're already eating home cooked meals, 3 of the meals per day, you have junk food like takeaway once a week or fortnight, then for you, starting to focus on the micro and macronutrients could be where your focus and your ability to adapt to is at. If you're on the other end of the spectrum where you're eating mostly takeaway food, then it's probably just getting one meal that's cooked in, even if it's one a week. Even if it just gives you the certainty of, oh, I know how to do that. The next week it might be 2 meals, the next week 3. This isn't a rush. It's about just doing what you can adapt to sustainably, ongoingly. Just like if you went to the gym, you're not going to try and do 100 kilos right off the bat. You're going to start with where you're at and you're going to just keep going gradually, allowing the gains to be locked in. So I call that resistance zones, which I've now just scribbled out. But hopefully that gives you the right mindset of trying to work out what is sustainable. You're not going to go out into the area where your willingness is low, your certainty is low, your comfort's low, requires too much energy, too much resistance, too much stress, and you're just not going to be able to do it. So, moving on. So in module 1, we covered this, and I've just simplified it here to really, I'm not going to spend too long on this because you covered it in module 1, but so first off, get your amount and your frequency sorted. Once you've got that dialed in, start optimizing the quality. Really, that's where your focus should be. And if you're doing that, you're going to be in a really good place. Okay, next up we have right thinking. So I mean this in like the Buddhist way of right action, right thinking. So when I say right thinking, often we think about healthy, unhealthy foods, that there's a right and wrong choice as a result. That isn't the best way to think about food. Instead, to think about it on a spectrum. So by going beyond right and wrong, we can think about food instead of this, oh, well, this is okay and this is out of bounds, which naturally creates resistance in our mind. And as soon as we put things outside of the allowed, we tend to want it. It then creates this unhealthy scarcity mindset where we prize these things and then we enjoy them so much more. And this becomes boring, this becomes exciting, and it creates a very unhealthy pleasure-pain cycle of almost addiction. So the better way to think about this is from an understanding of, okay, like, so this food has minerals, nutrients, vitamins. This has a lower GI. This has healthy fats. This has a high amount of processed sugars and fats. If I consume this and get, say, 100 grams of carbs, the result of that is likely to spike blood sugar and it's going to create inflammation, which is going to have XYZ problem. I believe by understanding the food and rather than demonizing it, we can actually have a healthy approach where there can be a time where you can have a donut, a croissant, or marshmallows. Not 90% of the time, but 10% of the time, that could be fine. And that's where it's really key, I think, to not be in the mindset of, oh, I've got this restrictive diet and then I can have a cheat meal and it's like this pleasure. Instead, I believe that we can create a meal plan, a way of eating that feels so tasty and nourishing that we don't need to go to the unhealthy foods. And I've personally done this where, so if I feel like a tasty food for dessert, instead of going and having a dessert that's highly processed, I'll just make my own with whole food ingredients that, okay, it doesn't taste as sugary and sweet, but it still hits the spot. And over time, you definitely adapt to enjoying that. I think the problem is often when we think eating healthy, we completely remove sugar. We completely remove everything that tastes good. And it's this kind of polarizing, really restrictive approach that isn't sustainable. So I think it's important just to reshape your thinking that healthy eating can be enjoyable, and it doesn't mean that it has to be devoid of everything. Let's say you're eating enough food consistently and it's of good quality. The likelihood that you're actually going to crave sweets is going to be very low. What I think a lot of people suffer from is they don't eat enough, their blood sugar dips, their body gives them the cue, it needs glucose, it needs sugar, and then that's when we go for the sugary foods and we go, oh, it made us feel better, I needed that. When you're eating enough and you're supporting blood sugar, you often will find that a lot of the cravings that you thought were for the food aren't actually there. So let's move on. Systems thinking. Now, this is really just about going from, what do I feel like eating? Oh, there's nothing in the fridge. Oh, I have to cook something, to, oh, well, I'll just order Uber Eats or takeaway because I'm hungry and there's too long to get to the food. Avoiding those scenarios and having systems in place to allow you to win, that's going to be what allows you to have a sustainable approach here. So there's a few things that I think work well for this. One, bulk making food. Having stuff in the fridge so when you're hungry, you can just go and throw something together in minutes. As well as knowing what your default meals are, where there's a meal that you love that you can make easily and you're like, yep, I could eat this 90% of the time and it's going to sustain me. That's something we're going to work out later in this course. Those two things there are going to be 90% of your systems. You don't even have to make a meal plan at that point. You can literally just have stuff in the fridge that you throw together and a default meal that you're like, yep, I'm just going to have that. You can go to the point of having a meal plan, but that can come later. And finally, understanding your body. So I touched on this briefly before, but it's a really key thing to understand. So your gut microbiome, the things that help you digest food, the bacteria that live symbiotically with you, there's various strains that are populated in your gut depending on what you eat. Different foods with fiber, etc. So the bacteria that live in your gut colonize, and there's multiple strains. I think there's like, let's say 16 primary ones, but there's probably millions that are actually within our gut creating an ecosystem. Let me just correct myself there. So the human gut contains hundreds to thousands of bacterial species. When it comes to probiotic supplementation, there's 10 to 16 strains that have been well researched, which they tend to focus on. So yes, there is 16 primary ones that we focus on that have been well researched, but there's hundreds to thousands. So got to keep myself accurate. When you eat fresh fruit and vegetables, that populates and feeds a certain strain. So I just want to share a little anecdote. A friend of mine came over to Thailand with me, and me, a Thai woman, and him ate the same meal, but he was violently ill from it. And I believe that it was because I'd been eating a lot of fruit and vegetables that came from the soil in Australia, and he hadn't as much. And so when we came to Thailand, my gut had a stronger, more flexible microbiome where his didn't, and then that's why he was so violently ill. Another example was a friend of mine, and she went from a fairly processed, sugary diet to eating clean, eating salads, vegetables, and what she found was her gut could not adapt to it. Mentally, she was doing it, but she had bloating, she was feeling bad, and what I believe happened was she introduced so much fiber and things that her body couldn't digest that it was creating a worse situation. And that kind of goes back to the resistance zones. You want to make sure that you're doing a slow, gradual approach so that your body can adapt, not just mentally, literally on the microbiome level. So one last thing to consider as well. The mouth, the palate. We often think, I don't like that food because it tastes bad. I want something sweeter. I want something saltier, whatever. I suspect that it's not just your mental craving, which is a part of it, but it's also your gut microbiome. That there's particular bacteria that are literally screaming for foods, and that is what is creating a part of the craving for you. So the more that you just kind of nudge that over time towards the foods that you want to be intaking, you might find that the foods you're craving no longer have the pull over you. So one last closing note. So I mentioned good, bad food, and I caught myself saying healthy, unhealthy. And look, let's be honest, there is healthy and unhealthy food, but also we don't want to be thinking about it in a restrictive way of this is okay and this isn't. Like I said before, anything that's outside our allowed zone, we tend to desire. So I think it's important to recognize, yes, this food has XYZ impact, might increase blood sugar, create inflammation, etc. But also realizing you can call it healthy, unhealthy, just don't attach good or bad to it. One more thing is on the topic of diets. I do use the term diet, but the way that I personally eat is a lifestyle. I have had many fluctuations, and like I've mentioned in the intro, when I was 19, I would eat a large pizza every night when I worked at a pizza store for 3 months in a row. Then I worked in a factory and I'd drink 2 liters of iced coffee and eat 2 meat pies, and that was my diet. Nowadays, I don't have I'm doing a diet and I have to strictly stick to this. I am like, this is what I want to eat, and I just kind of calibrate myself to that, and it's sustainable. So I just wanted to share that because if you're still thinking about things from a diet way, that okay, this is what I have to eat, that's probably not going to be sustainable. If you're close to it, okay, but really just think about what you can swap out, where you're at now, and just making little adjustments. That's going to be a far more sustainable way forward. So leave a comment, let me know if that made a lot of sense. Hopefully it did, and see you in the next module.